Hello everyone, how are you doing? This is the part 5 of the inventory tutorial series that I'm doing in this channel, and in this part we're going to start creating the inventory component and the functions to help us build this system. But before, if you do like this video, please hit the like button and subscribe so you don't lose any new content, and that helps me a lot. And without further ado, let's start. Okay, so first let's create a list of types for the inventory, and I'm going to do this exactly like the items. So I'm going to create an enumeration to put all the inventory types that we need. So let's do this. Let's go to the blueprints folder here. Let's open the data folder, and here I will create a new folder for inventory like this. Let's open this folder, and here let's create the enumeration. So right click, go to blueprint and enumeration. I will name this enum inventory types like this. Let's open this and let's start adding the enumerators. So let's add one, and this first one will be for the player like this. Let's add another one for storage and one more for loot like this. So now we have types of inventory, and of course in your game, if you have more types, you can just add more here. But for this system, this will be enough. So now let's create the struct for the slot. So what information each slot will have. So let's create the struct now. To create the slot struct, let's go back to the folders, and here in the same data inventory folder, let's create the struct. So right click, go to blueprint, structure. I will name this struct inventory slot like this. Let's open this and let's start adding the variables. So the first one will be the item ID. So let's change the name here to item ID. Let's change the type to name, because as I said in the last episode, name is the type of the row name in the data table. So let's add another variable here. This will be the amount. So of course this will be the amount of items that this slot has. So let's change the type here to integer. Let's add another one for occupied. So let me name occupied here. There you go. And this of course is a boolean. This is just a helper variable for us to easily know if this slot is occupied or not. Let's add another variable for the actor class. So let's name this actor class. And of course, this will be the type of actor, but we need to select soft class reference as we selected in the struct for the items. So there you go. This is all the information that this slot will have. So every slot will have the item ID, the amount of items, if it is occupied or not, and the actor class of the item. So now let's start creating the inventory component for the system. So let's do this. So let's go back to the folders here, and here let's go to blueprint and component, and let's create a new component. So right click, go to blueprint class and actor component. I will name this BPC for blueprint component and inventory like this. Let's open this, and first let's add some variables. So the first variable, let's go here to variable and just click on this plus icon to add a new one. So the first variable will be the inventory type. So let's change the name here to inventory type, and of course the type of this variable will be the enumerator that we created. So let's change the type here to enum inventory types like this. Let's add another variable for the slots count. So basically the amount of slots that this inventory will have. So let's change the name here to inventory to slots count, so actually like this. And of course this needs to be an integer. So let's change the type. And of course we need the content itself. So let's add a variable for the content of this inventory, and this will be the type of the struct for the slot that we created. So let's change the type here to struct inventory slot like this, and this needs to be an array. So basically a list of slots, because of course we need to have more than one slot. So just select the variable here, and here in the details just click on this icon and change to array like this. And for now, this is all the variables that we need. So now let's start implementing the initialization of the inventory. So let's do this. So I will create a function to initialize the inventory. So let's go here to functions and let's add a new one. I will name this initialize inventory like this. Inventory. And this function will be really simple. So let's start with a for loop. So just right click and type for loop. Let's get this for loop here, the flow control for loop. Let's connect the execution pin here. And of course, we need a first index and a last index. So for the first index, I will type 1 here. And for the last index, let's get the slots count like this. And let's connect on the last index. So this for loop will run from 1 until we hit the slots count. And of course, every time that this loop runs, we need to add a new slot on the content array. So let's get this content variable here. And because this is an array, we have some operations that we can use. So let's drag from this array and let's type add, so we can add a new slot to this array. So let's connect the loop body here. And from the new item here that we need to add, let's drag and let's click on make struct inventory slot here. So there we go. As you can see, we have the slot informations here that we put in the struct. So we have the item ID, amount, occupied, and actor class. But because this is the initialization of the inventory, we don't need to connect anything here because, of course, this slot is empty. So we don't need to connect anything in the item ID. The amount will be 0, the occupied will be false, and the actor class, of course, will be null. So there we go. This is the function. So every time that this loop runs, we are adding a new slot on the content array. And of course, this depends on the slots count variable. So there we go. This is the initialization for now. Later, we will come back to this function to add more. But for now, this is all we need to do here. So let's compile and save. And now let's start creating some helper functions that of course will help us in the future. So let's do this. But before, of course, we need to call this initialize inventory. So let's go back to the event graph here. Let's delete this event tick. We don't need this. And I will call the initialize inventory on the begin play. So let's drag the initialize inventory function here and let's connect on the begin play. So when this inventory loads into the level, the begin play will run. And of course, this will initialize the inventory for us. So there we go. Let's compile and save. And now let's create the helper functions. Okay, so the first helper function that I need to create is a function to find an empty slot. So let's go here to functions. Let's add a new one. I will name this find empty slot like this. And the first thing that I need to do is create a for each loop on this content array. So let's drag this here. And from this, let's type for each loop like this. And of course, this will run for each slot that we have in the content array. And for each slot, we need to ask if this slot is empty or not. And as you may remember, in the struct inventory slot here, we created a variable for occupied. So we can know if this slot is occupied or not. So here in the function, let's break this array element here. So let's just drag and type break struct inventory slot like this. So we have the informations of this slot and we have the occupied here. So let's connect this in a branch. So just add a branch here. Let's connect the loop body on this branch and let's connect the occupied on the condition here. So if this branch is true, that means that this slot is occupied. So this slot has an item, is not empty. But if this is false, that means that this occupied is false. So this slot is empty. So if this is false, we need to return this slot because we successfully found an empty slot. So from the false here, let's drag and type return to add a return node like this. And let's create some outputs here. So the first one will be a boolean for success. So if we successfully found an empty slot, let's change this to boolean and let me add a question mark at the end here. And let's add another variable for the slot index. So I will name this slot index. So if we find an empty slot, I need to return the slot index that we found. So let's connect the array index on this slot index here. So there we go. So now we need to return false, of course, if we don't found any empty slot. So we need to do this in this completed pin here, because if this loop complete, that means that we run through every slot here and we didn't found any empty slot, so this loop completed here. So from this we need to return again. So let's copy this return node here. You can copy by pressing Ctrl+C and Ctrl+V to paste like this. Let's connect the completed here, and let's return false on the success and -1 on the index here. There we go. And of course here we need to return true on the success like this. And there we go, this is the function. So every time that we call this function, we will get an empty slot if we have an empty slot in the inventory. So let's compile and save, and now let's create another helper function. Okay, so the next helper function that we need to create is a function to find a slot with an item that we can add more items to this same slot. So let's go to functions here, let's add a new one, and I will name this function find available slot with item like this. And this function needs an input, so the item that we want to add, so let's create this input here. Let's add one and let's name this item ID to add like this. And this needs to be a name, so change the type here to name. And the first thing that we need to do is get the information about this item. So for this, we created a function to get the info from the database, and we put this function in a blueprint function library. So that means that we can call this function from anywhere. So here we just need to click and type get item info from the B. As you can see here, from the blueprint function library items. So let's get this. And when I created this, I forgot, but we don't need this function to have pins, to have execution pins here. So let's double click on this function to open the blueprint function library. Let's click on the function here, and let's change this function to pure function. So just click on this pure function here and compile and save. And let's close the blueprint function library now. And as you can see, this function here don't need any execution pins now. So now let's continue implementing this function. Okay, so let's connect the item ID to add on the item ID here. So we have the informations here. And as you can see, we have a success variable here that tells us if we have this item on the DB. So let's connect this in a branch just to make sure, of course, so we don't have any errors. So let's connect this here. And let's break the item info structure. So let's just drag and type break struct like this. So we have all the informations about the item. So now we need to go through every slot that we have in the inventory, so in the content variable here, to see if we have a slot with the same item. So let's get the content array here. Let's drag here. And let's drag from this and type for each loop. So we have something that runs through every slot here, like this. And let's break the array element so we get the informations about the slot. So let's break this. There we go. So the first thing that I need to do here is see if the item ID that we have in the slot is the same that we are trying to add. So because this is a function, we can actually get this variable here without connecting any wires here. So let's just go here, right click and type item ID to add. So this variable here is the same as this, so we can do this in functions. So now we just need to check if the item ID that we want to add is the same as the slot. So let's drag from this and type equal like this. Let's connect this item ID from the slot here. And this is a boolean, so let's connect in a branch. Let's connect the loop body on the execution pin of the branch like this. And of course, if this is true, that means that we found a slot with the item. And if this is false, this slot don't have this item or is empty. So let me just drag this a little bit down here. Okay, so if this is true, that means that we found the slot, but now I need to see if we add one more item to this slot, we are still below the max stack size. So to see this, let's get the amount here. So let me drag from this and I will add one more, because when I will actually add the items to the slot, I will add one by one. So let's just type 1 here, like this. So we are getting the amount that we already have in the slot, and we are adding one more. So now I need to see if the result of this is less or equal to the max stack size. So let's drag from this and type less equal, like this, and let's connect the max stack size of the item, like this. And of course, this is a boolean, so let's connect in a branch. There we go, let's connect the execution pin on the first true here. And if this is true, that means that we found a slot with the same item that we can add one more. So in this case, we need to return the slot that we found. And of course, if this loop's completed, that means that we don't found any slot with the same item. So we need to return false here. So first, let's return true. So from this true here, let me add a return node. So just type return node here. And let's add two outputs here. So the first one will be success. So we can know if we successfully found the slot. There we go. And of course, this is a boolean, so let me add a question mark at the end here. And let's add one more output, and this will be the slot index that we just found. And this is an integer like this. So in this case that we found a slot with the same item, and we can add one more because we are getting the amount, we are adding one, and this is still below or equal to the max stack size. So that means that this slot, we can add one more in this slot. So let's let's check the success here, and let's connect the slot index, which is this array index of the for each loop. So let's just drag this and connect here. There you go. And now, as I said before, we just need to add a return node on the completed here. So I will drag from the completed of the loop to up here, and I will type return node again to add the return node. And in this case, that means that we do not found any slot with the item, or all the slots with the item is already full. So we need to return false on the success and -1 on the slot index. So let me type -1 here. There you go. And this is basically it. This function can find for us a slot with the item that we can add one more item to this slot. So I'm creating this helper function to, of course, help us dealing with the inventory operations, and of course to organize the code better, because if I did all this code here inside one function, the function will be really great and hard to maintain. So this is why. So now I just want to add these functions here to a category. So let's click on the function here, define empty slot, for example. And here in the category, let's just type helper. There you go, and let's add the find available slot with item in the helper function as well. So just select this, go here to category and just change to helper. So let's compile and save, and of course later in the series we will have more helper functions. This is just the beginning, but now we have a way to find an empty slot and a way to find a slot with the item that we can add more items to. So there you go. And this is all for this video. So I'm still experimenting with this series format, so I will try to make the videos more shorter because I think it's better for you to follow along. So in this video, we created the component for the inventory, we created the initialize inventory function, the find empty slot, and find available slot with item functions. So in the next video, I want to know if this is all working, so I will start creating the UI for the inventory in the next video. So we're going to create the widget for the slot, the widget for the player inventory, the widget for the slots container, and the widget for all the inventory. So a widget to hold the player inventory, and to hold the general inventory, so the inventory for the storage, the loot, and everything else. So I will start the player inventory UI on the next video. So if you do like this video, please hit the like button and subscribe so you don't lose any new content, and that helps me a lot. So thank you for watching, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next video.